The room went silent. Representative Jared Moskowitz locked eyes with Pam Bondi and Kash Patel, and you could feel the air shift. What started as routine questioning turned into something nobody expected. Moskowitz leaned forward, his voice calm but razor-sharp, and asked the one question everyone had been dancing around for months. The witnesses fumbled. They said it wasn't about lunch, insisted it wasn't about the president, but wouldn't say what it actually was about. And then Moskowitz dropped the name that made the entire hearing explode. 9 months. That's how long this had been going on. 9 months of scheduled hearings that never happened, promised testimonies that kept getting pushed back, and answers that never came. The committee had full jurisdiction over the Department of Justice. Yet somehow the most important case in recent memory kept slipping through the cracks. Pam Bondi, the Attorney General who swore she'd bring transparency, had been scheduled to appear over and over again. Each time, something came up. Each time it was pushed another 2 weeks. And when Moskowitz finally cornered her representatives in that hearing room, the excuses ran out.
Was coming in 4 weeks.
Fantastic. But still, we're not doing that this week, the week we're having votes on the Epstein thing. So, Pam Bondi gives the influencers, these Republican influencers, a binder. It says Part 1 of the Epstein files. No one ever saw it. It was quite spectacular. The Attorney General then says the Epstein list is on her desk. Then DOJ issues a memo, says there is no list. Then, do you have any questions about any of that? We've had no hearings on any of that at all. That, the list is on my desk, then there is no list. Then we gave binders to Republican influencers. This committee said no questions on any of how that transpired at the Department of Justice. Then hold on.
Well, it sounds like you're going to in the next few weeks. So that's a jolly good thing.
Mr. Farage, we can talk soon, but not yet. Okay.
Right.
So, then the president comes out and says the whole thing's a hoax. He blasts his own base. He blames Barack Obama. I mean, he hasn't been president for a very long time. Republicans then in committee vote against the release in the Rules Committee. Then Republicans refuse to go back in the Rules Committee because they're getting blasted for their vote, getting crushed by their own base. Congress leaves a day early. Then the administration sends the Deputy Attorney General to meet with Maxwell in jail. He happens to be Trump's former personal attorney. She says something favorable about the president. Miraculously, she gets transferred to a minimum security prison. The president starts talking about how he has the right to pardon her if he wanted to. The leaks to the Wall Street Journal then stop. We come back from break. We have the Massey petition. Comer does a document dump where 97% of these documents are already public. How long has he had those documents? Why hasn't he released them for the last 6 weeks? Does it the day of the vote. Then Republicans drop a non-binding resolution trying to kill the Massey discharge petition. The White House said passing the Massey discharge petition is a hostile act. Wow. That's a lot of distraction and deflection and misinformation. Wait, passing a discharge petition to release the Epstein files, the White House said would be a hostile act. Nope, we have no questions about that. But why? Why is it that we're spending so much political capital to keep this list from coming out? You think the list should come out? You think we should know the people who dealt with Mr. Epstein, Mr. Farage?
I thought I was coming to a hearing on free speech, not process.
Oh, but listen, here's the
And
good...
It sounds like you're discussing process.
No. Do you think the list should come out?
I have no opinion on it. I don't know at all.
So we have victims that were sexually abused by potentially people in power, and we don't know who's on the list.
I'm very happy.
Hold on, Mr.
Discuss that
Fresh. We
with
don't
you
know who's on the list. We don't
another
know.
time.
We don't know who's on the list. We don't know if the president is or is not. I'm not going to say he is or isn't. I'm just going to say these are weird behaviors. We don't know that there aren't other people in Congress that are on the list, right? We have no idea. Do you think the list should come out? You think people in power should be held to account for these victims who have been sexually abused and assaulted? You think the list should come out?
I think that I'm very happy to come to a different hearing where you talk about legal process.
Okay.
Will the gentleman yield for a quick question?
Well,
Were you aware that he has already called for the Epstein file to be released? It has been reported that he has called for it to be released.
Oh, yeah, right here. Just to refresh your memory.
Yeah, but
I happen to have this.
But that's not
How
what
random.
But that is not. Look, you can ask me if you like about
Do you agree
social
with
security
yourself?
policy.
Do you agree with yourself?
We are here to discuss free speech.
Hold on. It's awkward for your lunch after this? Do you agree with yourself?
No, it isn't at all.
Okay. Mr. Chairman, I'm just curious. This committee has jurisdiction over the
Gentlemen's
Department of
time.
Justice.
Yeah.
Why have we allowed Comer to cover this up for the last couple of months?
As I said,
Why is this committee not
I
taking
said 6 weeks
jurisdiction?
ago that we will have the FBI director in, we will have the attorney general in, and we are doing that in 2 weeks. You can you can go through that whole list. That whole list, you can do whatever you want to do with. I got lots of questions for the FBI director, including the whistleblower who came forward and told him that Adam Schiff leaked classified information. I want to ask him about that as well as the issues you all want to ask him about. That's why he's coming, so we can ask all these questions and follow the process, as Mr. Farage just talked about.
Mr.
The
Chairman,
gentleman from Virginia.
unanimous consent.
Unanimous consent.
I'd like to enter the political article into the record that Mr. Farage said the Epstein file should be released.
Without objection. The gentleman from Virginia is recognized.
I thank the chairman. I want to talk about censorship tools that are being used by Europe and protectionist measures that have major consequences for U.S. companies and free expression.
The strangest part wasn't the delays, though. It was what happened in between them. While Congress waited for basic answers, Bondi was apparently hosting private briefings. Republican influencers, people with no official oversight role, were given thick binders labeled Epstein Files Part 1. Glossy, detailed, exclusive access to information that elected representatives couldn't get. The optics alone were insane, but what came next made it so much worse. The very next day after those binders went out, the Department of Justice released an official memo. Short, direct, impossible to misinterpret. It said there is no list. Not that the list was classified. Not that it was being reviewed. Just flat out, no list exists. So if there's no list, what exactly was inside those binders? What were influencers being shown while Congress sat in the dark? The contradiction wasn't just embarrassing, it shredded any remaining credibility the DOJ had on this issue. Moskowitz laid it out piece by piece during the hearing. One day, Bondi says the list is sitting on her desk. The next day, her own department says it doesn't exist. When he asked for clarification, he got deflection. When he pushed harder, he got silence. The other committee members shuffled papers, avoided eye contact, tried to steer back to the original agenda, but Moskowitz wasn't letting it go. He'd watched months of this circus, and he was done playing along. Then the White House got involved, and things went from strange to chaotic. Instead of clearing up the confusion, the administration doubled down. They called the entire controversy a hoax. Not a misunderstanding, not a miscommunication, a hoax. The president went further, blasting his own supporters who were demanding answers and somehow blaming Barack Obama, who hadn't been in office for years. It was the kind of deflection that might have worked in a different era, but not anymore. The base wasn't buying it. Republican voters flooded social media, furious that their own party was blocking transparency. Congressional offices were swamped with calls. Representatives who had voted against releasing the files suddenly couldn't explain their reasoning without getting destroyed online. The blowback was so intense that when the Rules Committee scheduled a follow-up session, key members just didn't show up. They vanished. No explanations, no statements, just gone. Congress ended up leaving Washington a full day early, citing scheduling conflicts that nobody believed. But the real bombshell came from what happened behind the scenes while everyone was distracted by the political theater. Just days after the Rules Committee vote, the Deputy Attorney General made a quiet trip to a federal prison. Not just any prison visit, he went specifically to see Ghislaine Maxwell. And here's where it gets wild. This wasn't some random DOJ official. This was someone who used to be the president's personal attorney. The conflict of interest alone should have raised every red flag imaginable. What happened after that visit reads like something out of a thriller. Within days, Maxwell was transferred from her current facility to a minimum security prison. For someone convicted of trafficking charges that serious, that kind of transfer is almost unheard of without major developments in the case. But there were no public developments, no new cooperation agreements announced, nothing official at all. Just a sudden move to much more comfortable conditions. And then the leaks stopped. For months, details about the case had been trickling out to reporters. Anonymous sources, sealed documents getting referenced, the usual flow of information that happens in high-profile cases. After that prison visit and transfer, it all went silent. Completely. The same journalists who had been getting tips suddenly had nothing. The Wall Street Journal, which had been running regular updates, stopped publishing new information. It was like someone flipped a switch. Then came the pardon talk. Casually, almost offhandedly, the White House mentioned that the president has the constitutional power to issue pardons if he chooses. They weren't saying he would, just reminding everyone that he could. The timing was impossible to ignore. A private prison meeting, an unusual transfer, leaks stopping cold, and now pardon speculation all within the same 2-week window. Each piece by itself could maybe be explained away. Together, they painted a picture that made even skeptics nervous. When Congress came back from break, Representative Thomas Massie tried a different approach. He introduced a discharge petition, a procedural tool that lets members bypass leadership and force a vote directly. It was bold and it had real momentum. Dozens of representatives from both parties started signing on, feeling the pressure from constituents who wanted answers. For a brief moment, it looked like transparency might actually happen through sheer legislative force. The response was swift and coordinated. Republican leadership introduced a non-binding resolution specifically designed to kill the Massey petition. Non-binding means it doesn't actually do anything legally, but it sends a political message. It was a signal to members that leadership wanted this buried. And then, on the exact same day as the vote, the DOJ made a move that seemed designed to steal headlines. They released documents. Thousands and thousands of pages, dumped online all at once. The media went wild. Headlines screamed about the Epstein files finally being made public, transparency prevailing, the system working. Politicians pointed to the release as proof they'd been taking the issue seriously all along. For about 6 hours, it looked like a win. Then people actually started reading the documents. Journalists and researchers quickly realized something was off. The files looked familiar, too familiar. As they cross-referenced, the truth became embarrassing for everyone involved. 97% of what the DOJ released was already public. Old court filings, duplicate documents, heavily redacted pages that had been available for years. The DOJ had taken existing public records, repackaged them, and presented it as a major disclosure. It was transparency theater, a performance designed for cameras and headlines, not actual accountability. Moskowitz called it out immediately. He pulled up the statistics during the next hearing, showed the overlap, demonstrated how the public had been misled. And once again, he asked the simplest question, why? If these files were already public, why stage this elaborate release? If new information exists, why not share it? If there's nothing to hide, why all the misdirection? The officials in front of him gave the same non-answers they'd been giving for months. Ongoing investigations, legal constraints, process and procedure. But here's what made it all so frustrating. Those legal constraints, those procedures, they're real. There are legitimate reasons the DOJ might need to protect certain information. Victim identities need to be shielded. Grand jury materials are sealed by law. Ongoing investigations can't be compromised. Nobody reasonable disputes that. What people dispute is the inconsistency. If the DOJ wanted to follow proper legal channels, there were ways to do it that didn't involve contradicting themselves every other week. They could have offered a classified briefing to members of Congress with proper security clearances. That happens all the time with sensitive national security information. They could have provided a detailed chain of custody report showing exactly who had accessed these files and when. That's standard practice in any serious investigation. They could have brought in an independent inspector general to verify that procedures were being followed correctly. All of these mechanisms exist and get used regularly in other high-stakes cases. Instead, what the public got was chaos. A list that exists then doesn't exist. Binders for influencers, but not for oversight committees. Prison visits followed by convenient transfers. Document dumps full of old information presented as new revelations. Each move seemed calculated to create just enough confusion that people would stop asking questions. And for a lot of people, it worked. The timeline got so tangled, the contradictions so numerous, that it became easier to tune out than to follow along. But some people didn't tune out. Survivors of abuse, people who'd come forward after years of silence, watched all of this play out with growing frustration. They'd been told that speaking up would lead to accountability, that the system would finally catch the enablers and expose the network. Instead, they saw officials treating their trauma like a political football. Every delay felt personal. Every deflection felt like a betrayal. Every time someone called the issue a hoax, it minimized what they'd survived. One survivor told reporters they felt invisible. The politicians were arguing about process, while the actual human cost got lost in the noise. Another said they regretted coming forward, that if they'd known it would turn into this circus, they might have stayed quiet. These aren't abstract policy debates for them. Every day the information stays hidden is another day they live with the knowledge that their abusers might walk free because someone in power decided transparency was too politically risky. The technical aspects matter too, though. When an attorney general says a list is on her desk, that's not a casual statement. Documents have chains of custody. They get logged, tracked, and secured. If Bondi had physical possession of this list, there's a record of how it got there, who created it, who handled it before her. If that list then disappears, or gets denied by her own department, it means one of several things happened. Either the document was removed, or it was destroyed, or it never existed in the first place. In every scenario, someone is responsible. In every scenario, there should be documentation. When those same files or versions of them end up going to political influencers instead of the oversight committee, it stops being about legitimate classification concerns. It becomes a messaging strategy. The goal shifts from protecting sensitive information to controlling the narrative, and that's where the public trust breaks down completely. People can accept that some things need to be kept confidential for legal reasons. What they can't accept is picking and choosing who gets access based on political loyalty. Kash Patel, the FBI director, stayed mostly quiet through all of this. He was scheduled to testify, always 2 weeks away, always just about to provide answers. When he finally did appear at hearings, He cited ongoing investigations as the reason he couldn't comment on specifics. That's standard FBI practice, and normally it makes sense. But when the Attorney General is simultaneously claiming the list exists and the DOJ is saying it doesn't, silence from the FBI director looks less like following protocol and more like avoiding a mess. The pattern is what matters here. Each individual action could have an innocent explanation. Delays happen. Transfers get approved for various reasons. Document releases can be poorly coordinated. Prison visits might be routine. But when you line them all up chronologically, the sequence tells a different story. It's too organized to be random bureaucratic dysfunction. It's too convenient to be a coincidence. Each move seems designed to diffuse pressure right when it's building, to create enough noise that the previous contradiction gets forgotten. That's how modern information control works. You don't need to lie directly if you can create enough confusion that people give up trying to find the truth. You don't need to hide documents if you can bury them in thousands of pages of irrelevant material. You don't need to refuse oversight if you can just delay it indefinitely while claiming you're cooperating. It's death by 1,000 procedural cuts. And it's remarkably effective because most people don't have time to track every twist. But when someone like Moskowitz forces the issue into a public hearing, all those carefully managed pieces start falling apart. Suddenly, the contradictions can't be separated by weeks or months of news cycles. They're right there, back to back, impossible to ignore. That's why his confrontation mattered. Not because he revealed brand new information, but because he forced officials to own their inconsistencies in real time. He made the chaos visible. The other committee members tried to redirect. They reminded everyone the hearing was supposed to be about free speech, not about departmental processes. One representative even pulled up an article showing that the witness had previously called for the files to be released, as if that somehow answered the questions about what happened after that call. But Moskowitz didn't let it go. He kept pushing. Do you think the list should come out? Do you think victims deserve to know who enabled their abuse? Simple questions that should have simple answers. The witness, clearly uncomfortable, said he had no opinion. He didn't know enough about the situation to say whether transparency was appropriate. It was the safest possible response, the kind of answer that avoids any accountability. But it also revealed something important. Even people tangentially connected to this situation understood that taking a clear position was dangerous. The political calculus had gotten so twisted that advocating for basic transparency felt risky. The chairman eventually stepped in, promising that the Attorney General and FBI Director would appear in 2 weeks to answer these exact questions. It was the same promise that had been made for 9 months, but now it was on record again. Whether it would actually happen remained to be seen. The track record suggested more delays, more last-minute cancellations, more scheduling conflicts. But at least now, if it didn't happen, there would be footage of the promise being made. What makes this entire situation so corrosive is that it feeds the worst instincts on all sides. People who already distrust government see this as confirmation that institutions are hopelessly corrupt. People who support transparency feel gaslit by the constant contradictions. Survivors feel abandoned by a system that promised justice but delivered political theater. And officials trapped in the middle have to navigate impossible situations where any statement might blow up in their faces. Real accountability shouldn't be this complicated. If the list exists, brief the Oversight Committee under proper security protocols. If it doesn't exist, explain clearly why Bondi said it was on her desk. If Maxwell's transfer was routine, provide the documentation showing it followed standard procedures. If the document release was meant to be transparent, acknowledge that most of it was already public and commit to releasing what's actually new. None of this requires compromising legitimate security interests. It just requires treating the public and their representatives like adults who deserve straight answers. Instead, what we've gotten is a masterclass in how to avoid accountability while appearing to cooperate. Promise hearings that never happen. Release documents that contain nothing new. Brief influencers while stonewalling Congress. Meet with convicted criminals right before they get surprising benefits. Each action individually might have justification. Together, they form a pattern of evasion that's impossible to ignore. The political pressure is building, though. Every time this story pops back up, more people start paying attention. Every contradiction makes it harder for officials to simply wait out the news cycle. Every survivor who speaks up makes it more costly to keep delaying. That's why stories like this matter. Why they need to stay in the public conversation. Not to fuel conspiracy theories or partisan attacks, but to maintain pressure for basic governmental accountability. The next hearing is scheduled. Maybe it'll actually happen this time. Maybe Bondi and Patel will sit in those chairs and answer the questions they've been avoiding. Maybe we'll get clarity on whether the list exists, who's on it, and why transparency has been so difficult. Or maybe there will be another delay, another excuse, another promise that it's coming soon. Either way, the questions aren't going away. The survivors aren't going away. And the contradiction between what officials say and what actually happens is now documented for everyone to see. This isn't about picking sides or pushing partisan narratives. It's about a simple principle. When officials make contradictory statements about evidence related to abuse and trafficking, They owe the public an explanation. When they give political operatives access to information they deny to oversight committees, that demands scrutiny. When patterns of behavior consistently favor secrecy over transparency, people have every right to ask why. The truth is, we don't know who's on that list, if it even exists in the form people imagine. We don't know which officials are being protected, or if any actually need protecting. We don't know if the delays are legitimate legal caution or deliberate obstruction. What we do know is that the people in positions to provide answers keep contradicting themselves, and that alone is worth relentless questioning. Because in a system built on accountability, consistency matters. Transparency matters. And when both disappear behind a wall of excuses, citizens have to decide whether to accept the confusion or demand better. The choice isn't really that complicated. Either we believe officials deserve endless benefit of the doubt despite obvious contradictions, or we believe they owe us straight answers about serious allegations. Either we accept that some topics are too politically sensitive for transparency, or we insist that's exactly when transparency matters most. Either we let this story fade back into the background noise of politics, or we keep asking until the questions get answered. Moskowitz made his choice in that hearing room. He could have stuck to the agenda, asked safe questions about free speech, and avoided making waves. Instead, he forced an uncomfortable conversation that exposed months of dysfunction. Whether anything changes because of that confrontation depends on what happens next. Whether more officials get confronted, whether more journalists dig into the timeline, whether more citizens demand their representatives push for answers. The machinery of accountability only works when people refuse to let important stories disappear. That's not partisan. It's not conspiracy theorizing. It's basic civic responsibility. When something doesn't add up, you ask questions. When answers contradict each other, you push harder. When officials claim transparency while practicing secrecy, you call it out. And when survivors of abuse watch the system fail them in real time, you don't look away because the politics got messy. This story is still unfolding. New contradictions keep emerging. New delays keep getting announced. New promises keep getting made. Whether they lead anywhere or just add to the pile of broken assurances remains to be seen. But one thing is certain. The questions won't stop just because officials wish they would. The pressure won't disappear just because it's politically inconvenient. And the demand for actual transparency, not just the performance of it, will keep growing until someone finally decides honesty is less risky than more deception. That's where we are. 9 months of delays, countless contradictions, and one representative willing to make things uncomfortable by asking what everyone was thinking. The list exists, or it doesn't. Bondi has it, or she doesn't. The DOJ is being transparent, or it's playing games. There's no middle ground anymore. The contradictions are too blatant, the pattern too clear. So now we wait to see if accountability wins, or if the deflection just continues until people get tired of asking. The answer to that question says a lot more than just what happens with this case. It says what we're willing to accept from the people we trust with power.